Hi lovelies, you're welcome back to my channel. If you're a returning subscriber, you're welcome back and I appreciate. So I'm going to be drafting this beautiful top with this stylish waistline. Okay, so let's get started. Now with me here, I have my pattern paper and my materials to draft this out. So go ahead and determine your body measurement, okay? Now I'm going to be taking from my shoulder to my hip point, which is 26 inches. So I'm going to mark a point here and I will come down to 26 inches for my hip line. Now I will go ahead and rule a straight line on those points I have on my pattern paper. So after ruling the lines, I'm going to label this first line my shoulder line and then this other line my hip line. Now I'm going to be taking from my shoulder line to my bust line, from my shoulder line to my under bust line, which is 14.5 inches, then from my shoulder line to my front waistline, which is 18 inches. Now I'll go ahead and rule a straight line on those points. So after doing that, I'm just going to label it my bust line, my under bust line, and then my front waistline. Now from my front waistline here, I'm going to come down by 5 inches to get the full length of my top. So after ruling the line across, I'll just label this my full length line. Now from your waistline, you can come down by 6 inches, okay? If you want, that's the least you can come down by. Now I'm going to be marking 8 inches for my shoulder measurement divided by 2 on my shoulder line. Then I'll make use of 3 inches for the neck wideness, then 3 inches for the neck depth. Now I'll go ahead to connect the neck points together like so. So after doing that, from this 8 inches I have on my shoulder line, I will come down by 1 inch to get my shoulder slope, and then I will connect it like so to the neck wideness on the shoulder line. Now after doing that, I'm going to be taking my armhole circumference divided by 2, which gives me 8.5 inches. I'll mark the point there from like this, and then I will connect it to the shoulder slope point and also rule a straight line across just like this. So I'm going to label this line my chest line. Now after doing that, the next thing I'm going to do is to come up from my chest line by 2 inches. Now this is how covered I want the corset to be. You can make use of 1.5 inches as well, okay? Depend on how covered you want your cleavage to be. Now I'll go ahead and rule a straight line on that point that I have here, and I will label it my upper chest line. The next thing I will do is to divide from my shoulder slope point on the armhole area to the chest line. I will divide it by 2. I will get the midpoint, and then from that midpoint, I will go in by half of an inch. And then I will take my bust circumference divided by 4. I will mark it on my chest line and then go ahead to connect the front armhole like this. So after doing that, the next thing I'm going to do is to take my nipple to nipple measurement. I'm making use of 9 inches. I will divide it by 2 to get 4.5 inches. From my bust line here, I will mark the 4.5 inches all the way to my hip line. So after doing that, I will go ahead to rule a straight line on those points I marked out. Now this is my dart leg. The next thing I will do is to label this my center front and then my side front. Now from the hip line on the center front, I'm going to mark 1 inch all the way to the under bust line. Then at the side front, I'm going to mark 1 inch from the under bust line all the way to the hip line, like so. Now after doing that, I'll go ahead to connect the 1 inch point that I mark out. Now after doing that, from my bust line at the dart leg, I'll come down by 1 inch to avoid pointiness of the cup, and then I'll go ahead to connect it like so. Now after doing that, I'm going to be dividing what I have on my shoulder by 2. So I have 5 inches there, divided by 2 give me 2.5 inches. I'll mark the point there, and then I will go ahead to connect it this way to the bust line, that is the dart leg that is on the bust line. Now, after doing that, the next thing I'm going to do is for my side center front here, I'm going to mark 0.75. Then for the side front on the upper chest line, I will mark 1 inch. Okay, now I will go ahead to connect the point like so. Now, after doing that, the next thing I'm going to do is to measure from this point here on the side front cup and the center front cup. I'll measure it to know which one is longer than the other so I can extend it to match up the two cups together. After doing that, I realized that the center front is shorter with 1/4 inch, so I'll go ahead to extend it like so. Okay, so I'll just extend this with 1/4 inch, and then for the chest line on the center front, I'm going to go in by 1/2 inch, and then I'll go ahead to connect the point like so. So I'm just connecting the top, like the top of the cup like so. Now the next thing I will do is to connect the side cup to the armhole area. Okay, so from the chest line, I'm going to place my curve rule like so. I don't want it to be too deep. I will connect it this way. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to take my body measurement divided by 4. Then I'll replace the dart intake that I have on my upper chest line here. Then I will come to my waistline. I will take my waist circumference divided by 4. I will replace the dart intake of 2 inches. Then on my hip line, I will take my hip circumference divided by 4. I will replace the dart intake of 2 inches as well. Now I'll go ahead, use my pencil first to connect to those body points. Now, after doing that, the next thing I'm going to do is to be snatching this with 0.75. Now, if I do this for the front and the back pattern, I'm going to be snatching total of 3 inches from my actual waist circumference. Okay. Now, after marking that point, I'll go ahead to reconnect it back to the point I have on my chest line and then on my hip line, just like so. So I've gone ahead to snatch out the waistline. Now the next thing I'm going to do here is to come down from the bust line at the body measurement part here by 1.5 inches. And this is the difference between my front half length and my back half length. Okay. Now go ahead and rule connect it like so. I'm going to be closing this part. Okay, later on. Now the next thing I'm going to do is just to connect it from this point here. I'll connect it to the neck wideness, okay, just to form the yoke, okay. Now I'll go ahead to outline the yoke part. The next thing I'm going to do is just to close this up so that I can be able to get the shape of the side front cup, okay. Now after doing that, I'm going to divide what I have from this my actual body measurement to the armhole line. I will divide it by 2. I will get the midpoint. So from that midpoint, I'm going to connect it to the underbust point, just like so. So this is the reason why I have to close that side dart, okay, to do that. Now I'll go ahead now to label this my yoke. The next thing I'm going to do is to connect from the underbust part for the side center front to this point here I came in by on the chest line by 1/2 inch. Now I'm going to label this my cup 1 and my cup 2. And then the next thing I'm going to do is just to merge these two dart line together. Okay, now I'm going to be creating that shape that this dress have at the front part. Okay, now after doing that, from this my full length line on the body measurement, I'll come up by 1.5 inches. Okay, now from that 1.5 inches, I'm going to use my pencil first to connect it to the center front part closer to the hip line. Okay, so if you notice, I came up by 1/2 inch from the hip line on the center front before I connected the lines. Now, after doing that, I'm going to use my marker to outline this. So now this is the full body of the top. The next line I'm going to mark is for where that particular design that is like flay is going to be on top of the dress. After you've finished sewing the blouse, stitching it, shaping it, that particular design will just be on top of the dress like so. So from this blue marker that I'm marking here from the waistline meeting the hip line on the center front is where that shape, that flay design is going to be on. Okay, after you finish sewing your dress, you're going to place it on top of it. Okay, now I'll go ahead now to cut this out, but I'm going to be cutting from the yoke part. Okay, so I'll go ahead now and measure out quarter of an inch here on the yoke just to avoid gaping. Now after doing that, I'll go ahead to cut out the yoke. Now this is all for the yoke. I'm going to be cutting out the body of this dress. Now I'm going to be cutting out from the black marker. So which means the blue have already shortened with half of an inch. I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to explain here, but I'm going to be replacing that when I'm cutting out that flayed design. Okay, now we'll go ahead now to cut out this. So I'll go ahead to close up the dart, and then I will decide that, and then I will blend whatever that is shortened there, then cut out the front part. Now after doing this, the next thing I'm going to do is to join these two parts together with my tape, because I'm going to be cutting it on fold. Okay, you are to cut it on fold for this particular side. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to be working on the cup. Now there is a design at the front of this cup which I'm going to connect this way to the bust line. Then for the second cup, okay, now for the cup one, I'm going to connect it this way to the bust line like so. Now I'm going to have to cut out another cup one and another cup two, just like this. Okay, now I've gone ahead to do that. What I'm going to do now is to cut out from that place that I have my pencil mark. So I'm going to be making use of this particular part here for the cup one, and then for the cup two, I will still go ahead to cut out from that marker, from the pencil mark that I have on the cup two. Okay, now this is that design that is on the top of the dress. Now I'm going to be cutting this times two of this. Okay, I'm going to be cutting times two of that particular design on the cup, and then I'm going to be cutting times two of the actual cup. Now for the design that is outside the cup, you just need to add only your stay to actually sew it. Please do not add padded to it, just your stay to actually sew this and place on the actual cup that you add your padded to. Okay, now this is it for the front part. I'll go ahead to draft out the back pattern. So for the back pattern, I've gone ahead to mark 1.5 inches for my zipper allowance. Then I rule a straight line there and I labeled it my zipper. Okay, now I'm going to mark my shoulder point here. From my shoulder point, I'm going to come down to my bust point of 11 inches. From my shoulder point, I will come down to the back half length, which is 16.5 inches, which is also my waistline. Now, this is the difference of, remember at the front is 18 inches, but at the back is 16.5 inches. And that is the difference of 1.5 inches that I took as the side dart, so that the two sides of the front and the back will match up. Okay, now I'm going to label this my shoulder line, my bust line, and then my back waistline. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to come down by 8 inches to get my hip point. Okay, now I will go ahead and rule a straight line on that point that I have there. So after doing that, I'll just label this line my hip line. The next thing I'm going to do is from my back waistline, I will come down by 5 inches, just like I did for the front pattern. Now I will rule a straight line on this point here and I will label it my full length line. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to do is to start taking my measurement. Now I'm going to be taking my measurement from the zipper allowance line here. Now I'm going to take my shoulder measurement divided by 2. Then I will take 3 inches for the neck wideness. Then I will come down by 1.5 inches for the neck depth for the back. Now I will go ahead to connect the points like so, and then I will extend it to the zipper allowance area. Now on the 8 inches that I mark on my shoulder line, I will come down by 1 inch to get my shoulder slope, and then I will connect it to the neck wideness on the shoulder line. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to take my armhole circumference divided by 2, which gives me 8.5 inches. I will mark the point there, and then I will connect it to my shoulder slope point. Then I'll also rule a straight line like so to get my chest line. So after doing that, I'll just label this line my chest line. The next thing I will do is to take my bust circumference divided by 4. I'll mark the point there. And then I'm going to measure the armhole area to get the midpoint. So from this midpoint here, I'm going to connect it to the body shape on the chest line. And this is all for the back armhole. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to mark 4.5 inches, which is my nipple to nipple measurement divided by 2. I'll mark it from my chest line to the hip line. Now I'll go ahead to connect the points together like so. So after doing that, on the hip line, I will come up from the dart leg by 1.5 inches. Then on the waistline, I will mark half inch beside the dart leg. Now I'll go ahead to connect it like so to form the back dart. Now after doing that, the next thing I will do is to take my bust measurement divided by 4. I'll mark the point there, and then I will take my waist measurement divided by 4. I'll mark the point there, then I will replace the dart intake of 1 inch. Then on my hip line, I'm going to take my hip measurement divided by 4. And then there's no dart to be replaced there. So I'll just go ahead, use my pencil first to connect the body points like so. Now after connecting the body point, remember at the front, I snatched this with 0.25 on the waistline. So I'm going to repeat the same thing on the back waistline here. Now after snatching it with 0.75, I'll go ahead to reconnect this now with my marker to the chest line point, then to the hip line point, just like this. So I'm only snatching the waistline, okay? Then I will just reconnect the shapes together. Now the next thing I will do is from my full length line on the body measurement here, I will go up by 1.5 inches. Then below the full length line beside the zipper line, I will go down by 1.5 inches. Now this is to extend the back parts a little bit, that is that zipper area length a little bit. Now go ahead to connect the points like so. Now the next thing, I've gone ahead to mark to outline the actual part that will be for the zip. Okay, now I'm going to be working on the zipper area. I will extend that my back waistline into the zipper area. Then from that point, I will go in by half of an inch. Then I will go ahead to connect it like so. Now this is to avoid any form of zipper bulginess. Okay, now after connecting it like so, I'm going to be cutting out this particular place that I'm going to mark now. Now after doing that, this is totally all for the zipper part of this dress. Now I'm going to be working for the inner lacing part of this dress. Now first of all, I'm going to go in from this my zipper allowance line by 1.5 inches. I will mark this point all the way to the full length line of this top. So after marking the points, the next thing I'm going to do is to rule a straight line on those points I marked out. So because I want the lacing of the dress to be inside the dress, okay, now I'm going to come down from my chest line at the side by half of an inch. Then I'm going to go in like this to the center back by 1 inch. Now I'm going to be going up from this my full length line by 1 inch, and then I will connect it like so. Now this particular area has formed the inner lacing bar. Okay, I'm just going to indicate this so it will be more understandable and visible. Now I'm going to be tracing out this particular shape, that is the inner lacing bar, on another plain pattern paper. Now I've gone ahead to do that. I'm just going to cut out the shape, and the next thing I'm going to be doing, this is how it is. The next thing I'm going to be doing is, remember, we're going to hold the dart at the parts that have the zip. Now I'm just going to minus 1 inch from the lacing back part. Okay, that is from this part that is going to be inside the dress. So after marking out the 1 inch point, I'll just go ahead to cut it out. Okay. So after cutting out the 1 inch, this is all for the inner lacing bar. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is to work on that curve at the back part. Now I'm going to go in by 2 inches from the full length line now from the side, and then I will connect it all the way to the waistline, just like this in a curve method. Okay. So this is where that extension of the flay from the front will reach to the back part. Okay, now I'll go ahead to cut this out. Please go ahead to add your body allowance when cutting on your fabric. I did not add body allowance for this tutorial, so go ahead and add yours when cutting on your fabric. Okay, now I will go ahead to cut this out like so. Now the next part I'm going to be working is the lace. So from this my zipper area on the neck depth, I'm going to come down by 1 inch, and then I will go ahead to connect from that point to the dart leg. Okay, just like this, and this is all for the back piece. I will go ahead to label this my yoke. Then I will go ahead to cut out the yoke out. So I'm just going to extend the chest line to the zipper area. Then I will cut this out. So I'm going to be marking out 1/4 inch like so. This is just to avoid any gaping, just like I did for the front piece. I'll go ahead now to cut this for the yoke. Now I'm going to be cutting through the dart of the body, and then this is all for the back pattern. Okay, so I'm just going to mark the parts facing each other so it won't be confusing when sewing. And then I'll label this my center back and my side back. So I'm going to be cutting ×2 of the center back, ×2 of the side back, then ×2 of the yoke. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to be working on, like I said, please go ahead and add your body allowance of 1.5 inches for the side plus ½ inch stitching allowance. Then for the remaining part of the body, you can just add ½ inch stitching allowance. Okay, so just repeat the same thing for the inner lacing, but add your 1.5 inches body allowance plus ½ inch stitching allowance on the side. Then the remaining part, you can add your ½ inch stitching allowance all around. Okay, now this is all for the back pattern. I'll go ahead to draft out that shape, that is that flay shape on top of this dress. Now I'm going to measure this curve part I have for the center, for the back pattern. I'm going to measure it. Then I have 5 inches. Okay, so I'm going to bring my pattern paper, and then I will mark the back. I have 5 inches. Then for the front, I will measure what I have there. So remember, I'm going to be replacing ½ inch that I actually cut out from this dress when I was cutting the front pattern. So what I have now is 12 inches plus that ½ inch that I shortened when I was cutting out the front pattern. So I'm going to label it there. Now I'm going to bring a plain pattern paper. I will rule a straight line like so. And then I'm going to measure out 5 inches, which is for that back shape, that back curve shape. I'm going to measure that 5 inches point here, and then I will rule a straight line like so from that point, that 5 inches point I marked there. Now I'm going to be bringing the dress, and I will measure the side. Okay, so the side from the waist to the full length line is 3.5 inches. Now on this line I rule across, I'm going to measure that 3.5 inches point plus 1.5 inches extra, that is making 5 inches. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to do is to measure now the 12 inches on the other side. That is, this 12 inches is for the front, that curve at the front. Now I will measure the 12 inches from this point here, and I will mark it. So after connecting the point with my pencil, I will use my marker to outline it. So I don't know if I explained this in a way that you understand, but please just watch the video to still understand more. Okay, now the next thing I will do is just to outline it like so. Then I will go ahead to cut this out. So please, if there is something you don't understand about this tutorial, please feel free to ask question on the comment section. I will reply. So now I'm done cutting out the shape, okay? I'll go ahead to mark the middle point. So this is the middle point. Now I'm going to be placing this like so. So from that middle point, I'll place it on the joining of the front and the back. So you can see I have an accurate measurement. So this is how I'm going to forward it to the front curve as well. So let me just assume I've gone ahead to shape this dress. Okay, so I'm just going to tape this down. If you have shaped this dress, that is when you can actually um apply that design on it. So just go ahead and mark the same shape on the fabric itself. Okay, then before you start placing this, so the smaller part of this design is going to be going to the back area, like the back curve line. Okay, now go ahead, use my tape to tape this down, but you're going to use your sewing machine to sew this down, right side facing right side. Okay, now after doing that, this is what I have. You can see how lovely this came out. So this is all for this top. So remember, you have to cut times 2 of this flared design. Then you use your estay and your lining on it. Okay, now this is all for this top. Thanks for watching. Do not forget to subscribe, comment and share.